Us here with reaction to this, much more. Former Alaska Governor, Fox News contributor Sarah Palin. Governor, you know, they voted to defund, then delay, and now they just said no special treatment. If we have an employer mandate, we have an individual mandate exemption. And by the way, we don't subsidize Congress and not the rest of the country. And then nothing. What's your reaction?
Well, this is quite unfortunate, of course, and I hope that red state Democrats will be held to account as they're up for re-election. I can think of 3 right now who had even recognized recently Obamacare's fatal flaws, and yet they still had to go along like a bunch of sheep following Harry Reid with this partisan vote. Quite unfortunate. Now, all this hysteria anyway, Sean, over a partial government shutdown is exactly that. It's hysteria. There isn't going to be an actual government shutdown as long as we prioritize funding for those most important functions of our federal government. I can't believe that Harry Reid stood there on the Senate floor and said that Republicans don't believe in government. No, we don't believe in burdensome, intrusive, unconstitutional government. We believe in government fulfilling its proper role, which is a whole other story.
Well, in each case, they funded the entire government except for Obamacare, and now they watered it down to a 1-year delay in the individual mandate and the exemption for Congress. What is your reaction to how the Republicans have handled this, Governor?
Well, I think Republicans are kind of missing an opportunity here to explain not only more of the fatal, devastating flaws in Obamacare, which this policy, this new program, will decimate our middle class because it's going to make our workforce now a part-time workforce instead of full-time workforce that would require employers to provide health care coverage. So that we're missing an opportunity to help educate people more and more about what Obamacare really is entailing. But also we're missing the boat here on, again, the hysteria of a government shutdown. Remember what happened in the mid-90s with a government shutdown? As you humorously reminded your radio audience today, you said last time, you know, Bill Clinton hooked up with Monica. That's one thing that happened during the last shutdown. But also during the shutdown, Sean, what did we see? We saw the GOP actually gain seats. We retained the majority in the House and gained 2 Senate seats. We also saw welfare reform enacted during that period afterwards. And we also saw, finally, a balanced budget that a deal was struck there. So there are some good things that can come out of making our federal government as irrelevant, productively irrelevant in our lives as possible. We can do that through educating the public during an opportunity like this of some kind of partial government shutdown.
All right, Governor, one thing I'd like to see, and we'll get to this when we get back, I'd like to see Republicans stop negotiating with themselves. Also, when we come back, I want to ask you about what you think is going to happen next and what you would advise the leadership in the House to do next. As I understand it, as of this moment, we just got word that the Republicans are huddling in Speaker Boehner's office. What's going on, we don't know yet. We're going to have more with Governor Palin after the break. Go back to Hannity as we continue with former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. Governor, I guess the question is they went to delay, defund, and now they have gotten to the point no special treatment. Question is, what do Republicans do from here? We discussed this earlier with Pat. I think it's obvious they should just continue to fund each portion of government like they did the military and then hand it over to the Senate, and there's nothing else they can do. What do you think they should do?
Yeah, exactly. And remember, President Obama, when he was a candidate, he had promised that he would go line by line through the budget and unfund things that were unnecessary and fund the things that were a priority. Well, now's his chance and congressional leaders' chance to go line by line and fund those things that we need. Another thing that GOP leadership needs to do is remind the public this is not Armageddon. This is a pinprick. It is not the end of the world if there is a partial government shutdown. Now, President Obama, a couple weeks ago when he was hell-bent on dropping bombs on Syria, he said America doesn't do pinpricks. Well, no, we don't do pinpricks, but sometimes we elect them. And it's all the more reason then in dealing with what we have as leadership, politically speaking, in this country right now, that GOP stands firm, demands that same exemption for us average Americans that Congress gave themselves.
Yeah, I think it's important to remind people, and even the president said this in his press conference earlier today, that we're going to continue to fund the military and border control and air traffic controllers and mission control and Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and national security and public safety. I mean, all those things are funded here. And then the Republicans can, you know, piece by piece, continue to fund the rest of the government if they don't want the full bill, and then the Democrats will decide whether to fund the government or not. Maybe I'm just one of the few people. I'm just not. This doesn't impact me mentally. We've had 17 government shutdowns, Governor. I'm not afraid of a couple of weeks of government being shut down, especially it's a limited shutdown.
I don't think our politicians are actually afraid of the impacts of a partial government shutdown, a short-term shutdown. I think they're afraid of what the mainstream media will do to them, especially these GOP members. They need not be afraid. You know you're going to get blamed, GOP. Deal with it, you know, and use the opportunity again to educate the public on what is a priority for our federal government, what states' rights and responsibilities, and even more important, what individual initiative can do for this country again and for our industry, and as was intended by our founders, how limited federal government should be. This is the opportunity that we will have to show and to explain more about the roles of government in our lives.
What do you make of the name-calling that's gone on the last few days, Governor, and that is Republicans are hostage takers, they're strapping bombs on themselves, they're terrorists, arsonists, anarchists, extortionists. It's time to punch the bullies in the nose. They are racist. One House member said, your hate for this president comes before your love of this country. I mean, I can keep going on. What do you make of the left's rhetoric here?
Well, kind of like when Barack Obama had said, you know, you show up at a knife fight, well, we'll bring a gun, and then yet he preaches that sermon to the rest of us to watch our rhetoric, watch our words. Well, he turned tail, didn't he, from that sermon that he's always been preaching in allowing. He is the leader of the free world, and yet he allows via some perpetuation of this kind of rhetoric that is not productive. It doesn't do anybody any good. He can do something about it if he would just kind of rein in some of his boys.
Last question. I think the worst thing Republicans can do after they've now tried 3 times in good faith, and the president won't talk to them, Harry Reid won't talk to them, I think the worst thing that they could do at this point is cave, because I think it sends a very bad message to both the Democrats and the president that they can roll over them anytime they want. They were duly elected as well. What do you think the worst case scenario for the Republicans is here?
Yeah, it would be to cave. That would be the worst case scenario, and this will impact the 2014 midterm elections. Many fiscal conservatives especially will say, you know, what is the difference between the parties now if they're all going to kind of end up at the same end road with their capitulation and with their expenditures that are unaffordable and unsustainable, especially with Obamacare, what's coming down the pike. So what's the difference? So in these 2014 elections, unfortunately, too many people would just stay home and kind of give up on what the electorate could actually do. Red state Democrats, they need to be aware that we are watching their votes very closely as they're up for re-election, and of course those members of the GOP also that have seemed to kind of want to go along to get along and not do the job of will of the people that we need done. So 2014 big impacts will be felt with these votes coming up.
I think they've gone far enough, and as a matter of fact, further than I ever would. Governor, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.